unless your what you're doing is based on group behavior, you're really looking for individual behavior. You have to set this up in such a way that it's not about positive feedback. Initially, you're doing problem interviews. You're talking to them about their problems, right? There's not anything positive or negative about those problems. And when you get to solution, we'll get to that. But you have to, you have to set it up in such a way that you're not selling and trying to sell. As soon as you're trying to sell something, of course, people are either going to be like, some guy's trying to sell me something, or they're going to try to please you and say nice things. You also don't talk to your mom, and well, we're going to get into that, but mom, your sister, your friends, etc., who want to please you. You're trying to reach outside of your direct circle to do this stuff. So, I think focus groups have their place in certain types of things, but I don't think for this type of stuff, for this early stage stuff, it's worth relying on. The surveys are a similar thing. The thing you get out of surveys is you get sort of some kind of a response to an initial set of questions, but you don't get to get really good feedback on why, and you don't get to drill down deeper on that. So it's a very static thing that doesn't really lead to deeper understanding.
I think that surveys assume that you know the answer first, right? Because in order to put the question, you need to know something about it. And again, talk to the people who just are in the Lean Challenge so that you're not just taking my word for it, but every pivot I've ever made has been in an interview, not in a survey, because the customer told me something where it was a eureka moment for me that I would never have known if I would have given them a survey, because they wouldn't have told me that.
Right. So what you got to do is get out of building. And I hear this, I don't like talking to customers. They won't talk to me because I'm trying to sell something. I can't find them. I don't have the time. I already talked to a bunch of people who aren't necessarily customers, and they all think it's a good idea. Just, get rid of all of that. If you're an entrepreneur and you want to be doing this, you've got to talk to real customers and listen to their problems. It's not about selling your solution. There's a time and place for that once you figure it out, is listen to those customers, listen to their problems, not necessarily listen to their ideas for solutions at some point too, but always ask why and get back to the problem, because they own their problems, you own the solution. So in a problem interview, you're validating your hypotheses around the customer problem here. So who has the pain and what are you solving? So the plan for each item in the customer segment of problems, you create one or more hypothesis statements, write statements that are testable. So you can write statements that are sort of like, well, is it true or is it false? You want to test whether this thing is true or false. You should be able to answer it that way. Here's the example from Be Sticky. You want to talk about the Shewhart cycle?
Sure. By the way, Be Sticky was a concept I came up with and I failed. So it's a good way for you guys to learn from that. Because our market was entrepreneurs and startups. Didn't have any money. Oh well. Shewhart cycle. This is Shewhart was a disciple of Deming. This goes way back into the quality movement. Anybody who has an MBA knows what I'm talking about. But basically, it follows this concept of plan, do, check, act. And what you find is that this circle, this cycle, it follows everything in the world of business. And you know what? It's all everything that we do in Lean Startup follows this too. So, for instance, for Be Sticky, our problems were that it was difficult to manage churn. What churn is you'll find out as you move further in your startups, you'll get customers, and they're a customer for a while and they leave. When they leave, that's churn, and that's really expensive. Because if you think about it, your customer acquisition cost is front-loaded. You pay to get that customer, and then you need them to be a customer for a certain amount of time before you get that back. If they leave before you get it back, you have a business model that's like a leaky sieve. You won't make any money. So measuring churn becomes critical the minute that you start getting customers. And we knew that. And then our hypothesis was that managing churn is a top 3 priority. That's wrong. So another problem was that customer retention analysis is very time consuming. This was true. It's very hard to figure out what customers are doing and stuff like that. And our hypothesis is that customer retention analysis is a must-have. So much. And then another example of plan was, and so when you're in the plan phase, you're going to write down these hypotheses. What's the problem? You know, what's your hypothesis? So our problem is that you need to write code to redirect the user to do loyalty behaviors. Just so you understand what that even means. Think about Flickr. In Flickr, what you do is you sign up, and then the next thing that someone would do if they were a good customer is that they'd log in again. And the next thing that they would do is that they'd upload photos. And the next thing that they do is that they might tag those photos. And the next thing that they would do is share them. Those are all what's called activation or engagement metrics. It follows a pattern. So in your software, you will figure out what customers do to get engaged, and then you'll try to redirect them to them, like next time they log in, like, hey Bob, would you like to upload photos? Or I noticed you upload those photos, you haven't tagged them. Or I noticed you have these photos, why don't you share them with your friends? It's really easy, just type their names in here. And what that does is that creates engagement so that they keep coming back and they pay you, because if they don't do that, they're going to stop using your product. So how they're solving it right now is email autoresponders. And a lot of software will just send you an email reminding you to do something, but that's one level away from being in the software, right? And our hypothesis is that customers are writing personalization code or using email responders to drive loyalty behaviors. That turned out to be true. So our segments were startups. How many of you guys are really going to pay for anything? And entrepreneurial web companies. Who wouldn't pay for this? But and our hypothesis is that they're actively managing churn through a patchwork of tools.
So then, after you have this all set up, you put together a script for the customer interviews. Stick to the script. At the beginning, it may be a little awkward. It's good to practice this with someone else. So it's got to, it's somewhat natural, but you get to be a lot more pro at it. So it's not sort of a, and do you, kind of reading off of something. And then you document it immediately after. Some people try to document it during. If you have 2 people, maybe you can do that. But really, most of what you find in an interview, and we're talking about, if you want to keep these short, 15, 20, 30 minutes max for an interview like this, where you're doing problem interviews, because you've got to do a lot of these things. So if you spend 2 hours on each of them, you won't get a whole lot of them done. It's a question of validating, so you're trying to get this from lots of people. So the more you can keep it short, the better. So, but then document it immediately afterwards. It doesn't take that long. To do that, you'll get most of what you need down. If you wait a day or 2 days, you'll forget a whole bunch of things. And as an entrepreneur, you're a natural optimist who wants everything to fit into your vision, and so your mind will start, constructing ways that this stuff fits in, and you'll just forget things. Todd, you actually did for Barber Savant. You did how many interviews in 2 days? Or?
Well, I did 38 interviews in 3 days. That's a tip. You want to figure out if you go to a trade show, okay, where your customers are the trade, that they're all there. And trade organizations are about doing trade, so you get an email list before you go of everybody who's going to the conference. So I set up interviews from 8 a.m. to like 7 p.m. in Vegas with all these people, and I did 38 interviews in 3 days. I pivoted like 4 times while I was there. It was like a beautiful thing. So I strongly recommend doing trade shows. I think Tom Ordonez, who's out here somewhere, can tell you the same thing that he learned from trade shows.
Cool. So the first thing you do is, welcome them, thank them for the interview, explain that you're doing research on a new product idea. Again, you're separating solution stuff from problem. Don't talk about your solution. outline the process that you're going to go